All right, everyone. It is a little bit after 1:30, therefore I'm going to go ahead and begin today's webinar. So again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, web grant solicitation, that is, the fiscal year 2019 Supporting Effective Interventions for Adolescent Sex Offenders and Youth with Sexual Behavior Problems. My name is William Moore, and I am with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention's National Training and Technical Assistance Center, also known as NTTAC. And as your technical host, I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few features of the Adobe Connect webinar platform and provide a few announcements to keep in mind. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be published on NTTAC's YouTube page. The webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube page, where you can also view past webinars. For the event transcript and supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP NTTAC Help Desk. For those wishing to download a copy of the PowerPoint slides and other important documents, you may do so by locating the handouts pod directly above the chat area. Here, you will also find an FAQ for webinar participants that will likely address technical related questions. Click on the file name and then click the download button. During today's webinar, the presenter will address questions during our Q&A segment for the webinar. Please type your questions into the chat box as they arise. Now, for those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute to help us count. Go to the chat window and type the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If you are viewing alone, there's no need to type anything into the chat pod at this time. Again, I'll give folks just a few more seconds to do that. Please type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If you're viewing alone, there's no need to type anything at this time. At the conclusion of today's webinar, attendees will be sent a certificate of attendance. This certificate is sent approximately 1 hour following the conclusion of the event and is sent via an Adobe Connect thank you email. Please keep an eye on your email for your certificate. Please note that only participants that are registered and signed in will receive a certificate of attendance. And finally, at the conclusion of today's webinar, you will be provided with a link to a brief survey about today's presentation. The feedback you provide is used to assist in future planning and training. I will now turn today's presentation over to our moderator and presenter, Ms. Cindy Pappas, for today's webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, William. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Again, my name is Cindy Pappas. I am a Senior Policy Advisor with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and I will be managing this program, the 2019 Supporting Effective Interventions for Adolescent Sex Offenders and Youth with Sexual Behavior Problems. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining the webinar today. Before we get started, I'm going to give a little bit of information about our office. The Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, OJJDP, is a component of the Office of Justice programs within the U.S. Department of Justice. OJP's program offices include the Bureau of Justice Assistance, the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the National Institute of Justice, the Office for Victims of Crime, and the Office of Sex Offender Sentencing, Monitoring, Apprehending, Registering, and Tracking, also known as the SMART Office. At OJJDP, we envision a nation where our children are free from crime and violence, and if they do come into contact with the justice system, that contact should be both just and beneficial to them. By supporting states, local communities, and tribal jurisdictions in your efforts to develop and implement effective programs for juveniles, our office strives to strengthen the juvenile justice system's efforts to protect public safety, hold offenders accountable, and provide services that address the needs of youth and their families. During today's webinar, I'll provide an overview of FY 2019, Supporting Effective Interventions for Adolescent Sex Offenders and Youth with Sexual Behavior Problems. I will briefly review the solicitation requirements, and I will highlight resources and tools available to help in the application process. As William mentioned, there'll be time for a few questions at the end of the presentation, but please note I'll provide additional contact information as questions arise after the webinar and during the application process. So here is the link to, again, this is the 2019 Supporting Effective Interventions for Adolescent Sex Offenders and Youth with Sexual Behavior Problems program. If you haven't downloaded the application or the solicitation yet, I have the link. And I'll be walking through the solicitation today. It might be useful to have it open or printed and take notes and jot questions as they arise. Important date. Note this, circle that. It is applications are due no later than 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on June 25th, 2019. Again, June 25th, 2019. We do strongly encourage applicants to submit applications at least 72 hours prior to the due date. This will allow time for any problems that you might find when you're submitting the application, any issues that might occur with grants.gov. So again, the deadline, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, June 25th, but really consider and think about getting the applications in 72 hours prior to the application deadline. For this award, eligible applicants for both Category 1 and 2, and I'll be going into detail on both categories, are limited to states, including territories, units of local government, federally recognized Indian tribal governments, nonprofit organizations, and institutions of higher education. All recipients and subrecipients, including any for-profit organization, must forego any profit or management fee if awarded. We do welcome applications under which 2 or more entities would carry out the federal award. However, only one entity should be the applicant. All others must be proposed as subrecipients or subgrantees. And the applicant must be the entity that will have the primary responsibility for carrying out the award. And this includes administering the funding and managing the entire program. I just covered that. So for this program, brief overview, we are seeking proposals from applicant agencies to provide a continuum of intervention and supervision services for adolescent sex offenders and youth with sexual behavior problems, and treatment services for their victims and families. Under this initiative, successful applicants will have an established multidisciplinary team that supports a comprehensive, holistic approach to treating adolescents who commit sex crimes and youth with sexual behavior problems, as well as provide support services to victims and families, as well as caregivers. So we'll talk a little bit about our definitions as we're talking about these 2 distinct groups. For the purposes of this solicitation, the term adolescent sex offender generally refers to those youth aged 13 above who are in pre- or post-adjudication status for serious sexual offenses, those committed against family members or other non-family peer-age children. For purposes of this solicitation, youth with sexual behavior problems generally refers to those youth aged 9 to 12 who are in pre- or post-adjudication status for inappropriate sexual behavior with a family member, co-resident, or other non-family peer-age children. Think friends, neighbor, classmates. So again, this program has two categories for funding. Category 1 are program sites. We'll provide funding to as many as 3 sites. And Category 2 is our training and technical assistance. We will fund 1 awardee to provide training and technical assistance to the program sites under Category 1. For Category 1, we expect to make up to 3 awards, up to $475,000 for a 3-year project period starting October 1st, 2019. So that's a lot of information. I'm going to repeat this several times throughout the presentation because we do get several questions on many of our solicitations. We are making up to 3 awards, and each award is up to $475,000. So when you're submitting your budget, the total across the 36-month project period should not be greater than $475,000. It is not $475,000 per year. It is $475,000 for the entire project period, which will begin October 1st and last for 36 months. The goal of this category is to prevent sexual reoffending by adolescent sex offenders and youth with sexual behavior problems, to promote healing and provide services for victims and families. This program will assist communities in developing comprehensive, multidisciplinary approaches to provide a continuum of intervention and supervision services for adolescent sex offenders and youth with sexual behavior problems, and treatment services for their victims and families or caregivers. Applicants must have in place a functioning multidisciplinary team that can support a comprehensive, holistic approach to treat adolescent sex offenders, youth with sexual behavior problems, their victims and family members or caregivers, along with a history of working with interfamilial child abuse cases. This team, or subset of this team, should serve as the case staffing entity to determine service provision, including treatment, case management, and supervision for the adolescent sex offender or youth with sexual behavior problems. Multidisciplinary teams addressing these cases should consist of, but are not limited to, prosecutors, child welfare personnel, juvenile justice personnel, including probation and juvenile court, mental health, victim advocacy, law enforcement, and community service providers, community support providers. As part of the application, applicants should include the following information: a description of the multidisciplinary team and any past experience with responding to adolescent sex offenders and youth with sexual behavior problems. The description should include a list of member agencies and the lead agency. As a required application element, and this is important to note, this is an additional requirement for this solicitation, you must submit an attachment labeled multidisciplinary team that includes this information. Applicants must also include state or local data highlighting the prevalence of the problem within your target area, a description of any existing risk and needs assessment process used by the applicant to identify and evaluate recidivism, and appropriate service recommendations for the target population of youth. As with any youth in the juvenile justice system, the effective supervision of adolescent sex offenders and youth with sexual behavior problems is contingent on the development of a supervision or safety plan. Applicants must include a detailed description of the existing safety or supervision plan for these youth. Also, to include a list or description of the current range of pre- and post-adjudication services for adolescent sex offenders and youth with problematic sexual behaviors in the targeted community. This can include a system map outlining the process for responding to these behaviors and the agencies involved. This list of services should include both community-based and facility-based services. Include also a list or a description of services currently available for victims and family members or caregivers. Identify gaps in service delivery systems. A description of all proposed strategies to be funded with grant funds. So each strategy should clearly identify which target population it is intended to serve, for example, youth with sexual behavior problems or adolescent sex offenders, and should be aligned with the gap analysis provided. A key consideration for all program sites should be public safety balanced with prevention, early intervention, and treatment. Public safety is ensured throughout the development of an individualized supervision or safety plan for each youth. Applicants must include how they will ensure public safety as part of any proposed strategy to be funded. For Category 2, we expect to make one award up to $500,000 for a 3-year project period starting October 1st, 2019. And again, I will reiterate that is $500,000 across the 36 months. It is not $500,000 a year. So when you submit your budget, if you are submitting under Category 2 for the training and technical assistance funding, it should not be greater than $500,000 for the total project budget. The goals of Category 2 are to develop, design, and deliver training and technical assistance that supports and guides the program sites from Category 1 as they implement their community-based prevention, intervention, and treatment strategies for adolescent sex offenders, youth with sexual behavior problems, and their victims and families. Technical assistance needs may vary greatly depending on the current practices of each program site. Some sites may have a well-developed multidisciplinary team that addresses such cases. Others may have existing treatment services that specialize in juvenile sex offender treatment or victim and family services. And some sites may lack this capacity and need additional and enhanced training and technical assistance. Successful applicants are expected to implement the following deliverables: providing guidance and consultation to the funded program sites. This will include developing individualized training and technical assistance plans for each funded site. Technical assistance should be provided on-site, over the phone, and through other strategies as appropriate. Training and technical assistance should be inclusive of and responsive to the needs of all members of the multidisciplinary team at each site. And be responsible to plan and implement cross-site grant team meetings for as many as 3 representatives from each of the newly funded program sites each year of the project. Provide limited technical assistance to program sites funded in prior years. Develop reports for possible publications and disseminations that document the progress of project implementation and the model developed at each site, as well as provide information on adolescent sex offenders and youth with sexual behavior problems for professionals and families. Applicants should demonstrate as part of their application their expertise and experience in the following areas. Training and technical assistance for communities on implementing evidence-based treatment modules for adolescent sex offenders and youth with sexual behavior problems. This may include, but is not limited to, multisystemic therapy, problematic sexual behaviors, problematic sexual behavior, cognitive behavior therapy, cognitive behavioral group therapy, family therapy, individual therapy, residential treatment, and inpatient psychiatric treatment. Training and technical assistance to a wide range of communities, agencies, and disciplines to include social service staff, juvenile justice professionals, probation staff, juvenile court staff, prosecution, mental health personnel, victim advocates, law enforcement, and community support providers. Providing training and technical assistance and support for communities through multidisciplinary, collaborative team development, including building community support and involvement. And to develop and implement training materials and curricula addressing community-based treatment of adolescent sex offenders, youth with sexual behavior problems, as well as resources for and contributions to the evidence-based treatment of victims of these youth. OJJDP has developed the core performance standards for training, technical assistance, and evaluation to promote among providers the consistency and quality of OJJDP-sponsored training and technical assistance, and to advance common expectations of performance excellence. The standards present minimum expectations that providers must meet for effective practice in the planning, coordination, delivery, and evaluation of training. Award recipients must coordinate with OJJDP's National Training and Technical Assistance Center, NTTAC, in the assessment and delivery of services to ensure the effective use of OJJDP grant funding. The award recipient must comply with OJJDP's webinar guidelines as described in the core performance standards. And award recipients must use OJJDP's standard electronic training request form, submit information to NTTAC on all training events 30 days in advance of the event date, and report additional data as OJJDP requires. Please note additional resources listed in the solicitation to include a link to the Emotional Center on the Sexual Behavior of Youth. Child Advocacy Center model is one example of a successful multidisciplinary team model which brings together representatives from many disciplines, including law enforcement, child protection, prosecution, medical, mental health, and victim advocacy, to provide comprehensive services to children exposed to violence, including child sexual abuse. Family justice centers around the country offer a wide range of services and support for adult victims and their children, including direct links to child advocacy centers for children who have witnessed or directly experienced violence in their homes. I have a link here as well for OJJDP's model program guides, which contains information about evidence-based juvenile justice and youth prevention, intervention, and reentry programs. It is a resource for practitioners and communities about what works, what is promising, and what does not work in juvenile justice, delinquency prevention, and child protection and safety. And finally, OJP's crimesolution.gov uses rigorous research to inform practitioners and policymakers about what works in criminal justice, juvenile justice, and crime victim services. The performance measures for this solicitation are listed in Appendix A. It's important to familiarize yourself with the data that will be required for successful applicants to collect post-award, but please note that you are not expected or required to submit performance data with this application. A successful applicant will clearly articulate a plan for collecting the data required for this solicitation's performance measures. For this, as well as throughout the entire solicitation grant writing process, is OJP's Grant Application Resource Guide, which is linked here and linked throughout the entire solicitation, and it is a vital tool to assist your entire application process. And includes additional information on post-award reporting requirements, including our performance measures data. So, now that we have a greater understanding of the purpose of the program, I'll cover what you'll need to include in your application. As I mentioned at the beginning, and I'll reiterate at the end of this presentation, if at any time you need technical assistance with submitting your application, you can contact grants.gov customer support hotline. And if at any time you have questions about the requirements, should we not cover them today, you can contact our response center. Again, this contact information will be provided at the end of the presentation and is also listed on page 2 of the solicitation. So, what is required? A lot. Here is everything that an application should include, and we'll go through each one briefly. Again, throughout the solicitation, OJP's Grant Application Resource Guide is linked and serves as a tool to give you guidance on exactly what each of these is and what is required. So the SS424 is a required standard form used as a cover sheet for submission of pre-applications, applications, and related information. It is completed through grants.gov, and it includes basic information, including your information, the title of your project, and the amount of funding requested. The project abstract should be brief, 400 words or less, and should describe the project's purpose, the population to be served, and the activities that the applicant will implement to achieve the project goals and objectives. This should be included as a separate attachment, single-spaced, in 12-point font with 1-inch margins. We're pretty specific. And the project abstract will not count against the page limit for the program narrative, which we'll get into now. So this is where all of your details will be included. This is the program narrative that presents a detailed description of the purpose, goals, objectives, strategies, design, and management of the proposed program. Again, our requirements that it should be double-spaced, 1-inch margins, not exceeding 30 pages, and use a standard 12-point font, preferably Times New Roman. Applicants must provide references as a separate, or applicants may provide references as a separate attachment, and this will not count towards the 30-page program narrative limit. If the program narrative fails to comply with these length-related restrictions, OJJDP may consider such noncompliance in the peer review and in final award decisions. So we do take it pretty seriously. Now, within the program narrative, the statement of the problem should briefly describe the nature and scope of the problem that the program will address. In this case, adolescent sex offenders, youth with sexual behavior problems, victim services, training needs, etc. The applicant should use data to provide evidence that the problem exists, demonstrate the size and scope of the problem, and document the effects of the program on the target population and larger community. Any data or research reference in the narrative should include information about the source of the data and/or a citation. Applicants should describe any research or evaluation studies that relate to the problem and contribute to their understanding of its causes and potential solutions. Category 2 applicants must present a clear understanding of issues pertaining to developing and implementing multifaceted intervention programs that serve the target population identified in the solicitation, and detail how targeted training and technical assistance can address these issues. Applicants should detail how the project will operate throughout the funding period and describe the strategies that they will use to achieve the goals and objectives identified. This section should also include details regarding any leveraged resources, cash or in kind, from local sources to support the project, and discuss plans for sustainability beyond the grant period. Applicants under Category 2 should outline how they will provide training and technical assistance that supports the development of innovative treatment and service strategies that could be replicated in communities nationwide. Applicants should describe strategies that they will use to develop and deliver training and technical assistance related to the target population. All applicants should include, this is both Category 1 and 2, all applicants should include a logic model as a separate attachment that graphically illustrates how the performance measures are related to the project's programs, goals, objectives, and deliverables. And all applicants should also submit a realistic timeline or milestone chart as a separate attachment that indicates major tasks associated with the goals and objectives of the project. Within this timeline, it should include responsibility for each of the major tasks associated with the goals and objectives, and plot completion of each task by month or quarter for the duration of the award, which for both categories is 36 months. Capabilities and competencies. This section should describe the experience and capability of the applicant organization and any contractors or subgrantees that the applicant will use to implement and manage this effort and its associated federal funding. Should highlight any previous experience implementing projects of similar design or magnitude. Applicants should describe the roles and responsibilities of project staff and explain the program's organizational structure and operations. Applicants should include a copy of your organizational chart showing how the organization operates, including who manages the finances, how the organization manages subawards, if there will be any, and the management of the project proposed for funding. Category 2 applicants should discuss in the capabilities and competencies section experience providing training and technical assistance to service delivery, management, and intervention agencies, your ability to enhance multidisciplinary team functioning, and develop an intervention program that incorporates program area needs such as supervision, treatment, and family stabilization, and an ability to identify and develop outreach strategies to serve target populations that are not clearly identified as needing services or may be reluctant to participate in serving planning and programming. If you are submitting a joint application, applicants should provide signed and dated letters of support or memoranda of understanding for all key partners that include the following: expression of support for the program and a statement of willingness to participate and collaborate with it. A description of the partner's current role and responsibility in the planning process and expected responsibilities when the program is operational if selected for funding. And an estimate of the percentage of time that the partner will devote to the planning and operation of the project. Letters of support may be addressed to OJJDP Administrator Karen Harp. Only letters of support that are submitted by the due date, June 25th, at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with the full application will be considered during the review process. Again, the plan should demonstrate how your understanding of the performance data reporting requirements for this grant program and detail how you will gather the required data should you receive funding. Again, applicants are not required to submit performance data with the application. You can visit OJP's performance measurement page at the link here, www.ojp.gov/performance, for an overview of performance measurement activities at OJP. All applicants should use the Excel version of OJP's budget detail worksheet when completing the proposed budget in your application. And this is, again, linked in the solicitation. The budget detail worksheet should include a thorough and clear description of every cost listed in the narrative section for each budget category. The budget must be complete, cost-effective, and allowable. And allowable means reasonable, allocable, and necessary for project activities. Budget narratives should demonstrate generally how applicants will maximize cost effectiveness for grant expenditures. Budget narratives should demonstrate cost effectiveness in relation to potential alternatives and the goals of the project. The narrative should be mathematically sound and correspond clearly with the line item computations provided in the budget detail worksheet. Successful applicants for Category 1 are expected to participate in an up to 3-day cross-site grantee meeting each year of the project and budget for as many as 3 representatives to travel to attend these meetings. So in the travel section of the budget, while there isn't a necessary location, budget for at least 3 staff to attend training once a year, up to 3 days. There's quite a bit of additional information. Again, the OJP's resource guide throughout the solicitation links, but I'll highlight each one of these individually and briefly discuss. The indirect cost rate agreement, an applicant with a current, meaning unexpired, federally approved indirect cost rate is to attach a copy of the indirect cost rate agreement to the application. An applicant that does not have a current federally approved rate may request one through its cognizant federal agency if you are seeking indirect costs in your budget. Tribal authorizing resolution, if applicable, a tribe, tribal organization, or third party that proposes to provide direct services or assistance to residents on tribal lands should include in its application a resolution, letter, affidavit, or other documentation as appropriate that demonstrates that the applicant has a requisite authorization from the tribe or tribes to implement the proposed project on tribal land. Every OJP applicant must submit an OJP Financial Management and System of Internal Controls questionnaire, and the link is also within the solicitation. Every applicant must also complete and submit the Disclosure of Lobbying Activities form. The link is in the application as well. Even if you do not expend any funds or lobbying activities, you still are to submit this form and enter NA in text box item number 10, where it has name and address of lobbying registrant, and submit that form along with your application. We ask each applicant to discuss whether it has or is proposed as a subrecipient under any pending application for federal funded grants or cooperative agreements that, 1, include requests for funding to support the same project being proposed in this application, or 2, would cover any identical cost items outlined in the budget submitted to OJP as part of the application under this solicitation. If you are designated as a DOJ high-risk grantee, you are to submit as a separate attachment to your application information that we will use, among other pertinent information, to determine whether we will consider or select your application for an award under this solicitation. If you are proposing research, including research and development or an evaluation, you must demonstrate research and evaluation independence and integrity, including appropriate safeguards before you will receive any award funds. Again, for additional information and guidance on all of these requirements, I know it's a tremendous amount of information, including appropriate safeguards, see the OJP Grant Application Resource Guide, again, linked throughout the entire solicitation. One thing that is new this year, if this is not your first time applying with us, we are giving priority consideration to applications that propose projects that will likely enhance public safety in federally designated qualified opportunity zones. So programs that plan to invest in, these are economically distressed community programs that will benefit a disaster area, should provide a narrative to explain the public safety benefits. So if you don't know if you're a qualified opportunity zone, you would be listed, the current list of designated qualified opportunity zones can be found at the U.S. Department of Treasury's resource webpage on this link. And the link is in the website. It is also in the solicitation. So again, that would be yet another separate attachment indicating that you are a qualified opportunity zone and how this project will directly benefit public safety. So we've covered the what and now the where. We must register with grants.gov prior to submitting an application. Again, applications are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on June 25th, 2019. To be considered timely, an application must be submitted by the application deadline using grants.gov, and the applicant must have received a validation message from grants.gov that indicates successful and timely submission. This is why, as I mentioned at the beginning, we urge applicants to submit at least 72 hours prior to the application due date to allow time for you to receive that validation message or a rejection notification from grants.gov, and that will give you ample time to correct any problems that may have caused that rejection notification. We also suggest that you sign up for grants.gov email notifications regarding this solicitation. If this solicitation is modified, individuals who sign up with grants.gov for updates will automatically be notified. As promised, I'm going to get into questions and answers in a moment, but if you have any questions regarding the requirements of the solicitation, our response center, and we have our number and email here. Our hours are 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the solicitation close date, which is June 25th. So this number is in the solicitation on this webpage, and they are fabulous and are there to assist with any questions you have about the solicitation. If you have technical assistance needs submitting an application, this is the grants.gov customer support hotline number, webpage, as well as email, and they are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, except on federal holidays. Also fabulous, and there to support and help. So once you've submitted your application, you've got it in a timely manner, and we begin our review process. And we are committed to ensuring a fair and open process for awarding grants. Our peer reviewers will review the applications submitted under this solicitation that meet basic minimum requirements. And what that means is that it was submitted by an eligible type of applicant, which we've covered, that the application requested funding within programmatic funding constraints, if applicable, and we've covered all of those. And the application was responsive to the scope of the solicitation and included all items designated as critical elements. Once it goes through the rigorous review process, award notifications will be made to those selected applicants. So that was a tremendous amount of information. We're going to get into our questions and answers section. We actually did receive quite a few inquiries to our response center prior to the webinar. So I'm going to have William ask those first, and then if those still have not addressed the questions that you may have, I will address as many additional questions from you all within the time remaining. Again, noting that any questions at any time regarding the requirements of the solicitation can be addressed to the response center. But note that I cannot give guidance to any specific requests about your project or facilitate any of those questions as it relates to what you are seeking funding for. Just clarification on what we are seeking within the solicitation. So with that, William, I will ask you to provide our first set of questions.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. So our first question, are there examples of previously funded projects under this award?
There are. Actually, this is not our first year funding this. That's a good question. The last time we competed this solicitation for both Category 1 and Category 2 was in 2016. And at that time, we provided funding to 3 program sites, and we also funded 1 training and technical assistance provider. Now, in 2017, we provided funding under this solicitation for program sites only and made 2 awards at that time. And at the time, we provided continuation funding to the 2016 training and technical assistance provider to continue to provide support to the FY16 and 17 sites. So I feel like that was a lot of FY16s and 17, so my apologies. The information on these and all of our past solicitations and awards can be found on the OJJDP.gov website under the Funding tab.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. And for our audience, I'm going to go ahead and paste the website in there. And then also remember it's under the Funding tab there so that folks can have that information readily available for them. So thank you, Cindy. So a quick follow-up question for you, Cindy. Will OJJDP offer this solicitation in fiscal year 2020?
Boy, I hope so, but it's too soon to know what the FY20 budget will include. However, interest in solicitations is definitely a consideration. The best resource to identify plans for FY20 when they become available is OJP's Funding Resource Center. And I can give you that link as well if you'd like to post that, William. It is ojp.gov/funding. And again, that is OJP's Funding Resource Center that has FY20 plans. Now, we may, in certain cases, provide additional funding in future years to awards made under this solicitation through continuation awards, but that will depend on what funding we have available.
Great. And again, for the audience, I did post that link there in the chat pod for you to access. Thank you, Cindy. Our next question here is the funding for Category 1 $475,000 per year for 3 years, or is it $475,000 total over 3 years?
Yeah, that I'm going to see if I can find that. And so that is the question we get, and it can read confusing sometimes, and that's why I repeat it several times. So it is really important that applicants should apply for funding up to $475,000 across the 36-month award. It is not an annual sum for 3 years. That is for program sites for Category 1, and in Category 2, you should budget and apply for funding up to $500,000 across the 36-month award, not $500,000 a year for 3 years. And that is the maximum you can request. You can request less than, just not more.
Thank you so much for that clarification, Cindy. Now, as another follow-up, is there a match requirement for this funding?
No, this solicitation does not require a match for either category, but if a successful applicant proposes a voluntary match amount and we approve the budget, the total match amount incorporated into the approved budget becomes mandatory and subject to audit. That is something to note.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I saw this question come over the chat, and so it's good that we had this submitted before. Cindy, how is youth defined for the purpose of this grant?
Sure. Let me get back to our definitions. For OJJDP, we consider youth to be under the age of 18. My apologies. I wish there was an easier way to get back to these guys. There we are. So under the age of 18 is our target population. And again, our definitions for the purposes of this solicitation, when we refer to adolescent sex offenders, we generally, and again, this is general, refer to those youth aged 13 and above who are in pre or post adjudication status for serious sexual offenses. For this solicitation, youth with sexual behavior problems generally refers to those youth aged 19 to 12 who are in pre and post adjudication status for inappropriate sexual behaviors. Can be younger, but not over the age of 18.
Thanks again for that clarification. And this solicitation states that it is seeking applications for sex offender treatment for adolescents. Cindy, can you provide examples of successful sex offender treatments for this age group?
As listed in the solicitation and our work in this area, some examples of successful treatments include cognitive behavioral relapse prevention, psychotherapeutic, sexual trauma, multi-systemic therapy. And a key consideration for all program sites should be public safety balanced with prevention, early intervention, and treatment. And as I mentioned in the earlier slide, public safety is ensured through the development of individualized supervision or safety plans for each youth. And an applicant must include how they will ensure public safety as part of any proposed strategies to be funded. So it's a good question. Thank you for whoever asked that if you're online.
Outstanding. Our next question, is a multidisciplinary team a requirement for Category 1?
Yes, yes, yes. This is a critical element, as critical as all of the other parts that we spoke about today, and should be an additional attachment. Applicants must have in place a functioning multidisciplinary team that can support a comprehensive, holistic approach. I have this on a slide as well. I can pull up. There we are. So it should include a holistic approach to treat adolescent sex offenders, youth with sexual behavior problems, and their victims and family members or caregivers, along with a history of working with interfamilial child abuse cases. Multidisciplinary teams addressing these cases should consist but are not limited to prosecutors, child welfare personnel, and juvenile justice personnel, including probation and juvenile court, mental health, victim advocacy, law enforcement, and community support providers. Again, this team or subset of this team should serve as the case staffing entity to determine service provision, including treatment, case management, and supervision for the adolescent sex offender or youth with sexual behavior problems. Sorry to be reading directly at you all, but it's so important. I want to make sure I capture every bit of what's in the solicitation, because that is a critical component to the solicitation.
All right, and thank you for revisiting that. Our next question, what level of training and technical assistance experience are you seeking for Category 2?
Category 2, again, applicants must present a clear understanding of issues pertaining to developing and implementing multifaceted intervention programs that serve the target population identified in this solicitation, and really detail how targeted training and technical assistance can address these issues. We are seeking applicants with experience implementing evidence-based treatment modules for adolescent sex offenders and youth with sexual behavior problems, to include multi-systemic therapy, problematic sexual behavior, cognitive behavior therapy, cognitive behavior group therapy, family therapy, individual therapy, residential treatment, and inpatient psychiatric treatment.
All right, great. Thank you. And so our next question, Cindy, what is the competition ID referenced in the solicitation?
Oh, wow. Someone really has dug into the details, and that is a great, great question. When you're applying in grants.gov, it's important to select the appropriate competition ID for either Category 1 or Category 2. If you go on to page 21 of the solicitation, you'll see what that's referencing. So Category 1 program sites, competition ID, and these both start with the same beginning, OJJDP-2019. For program sites, the last 5 digits are 15909. For Category 2, training and technical assistance, the last 5 digits are 15910. So again, when applying in grants.gov, and keep this noted for any time you're applying for a solicitation where there are multiple categories, there'll be a separate competition ID for those. So great question.
Awesome, awesome. So Cindy, last few questions that we have here, pre-submitted questions, and again, this is good because I've seen a couple of these come into our chat box here. Cindy, how will I be notified if my agency is selected to receive an award?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Both the point of contact and the authorizing official on the grant application will receive an email award notification. And this will provide further information on procedures for receiving the funding. Applications receiving an award will be notified by September 30th, 2019. So September 30th of this year,
now,
you will know.
Great, September 30th. Right. All right, and again, as a follow-up question, how will I be notified if my agency is not selected to receive an award?
Great question as well. Sadly, if you're not selected to receive an award, the point of contact and the authorizing official on the application will receive an email notification and summary of peer review comments. So you will receive feedback from us as to why your application was not selected by October 30th. So September 30th if you are selected to receive the award, and then October 30th if you are not.
Great. Okay. Well, Cindy, those are all the questions that we've received in advance, and so if you would like to respond to any of the questions in the chat box that have not been addressed yet, please note that we have approximately 30 minutes remaining.
Sure. Okay, so Joyce, the link to view the 2016's awards was not working when I attempted to open it. Has that link been fixed? Joyce, I'm so sorry. I did not know that was not working. I will check with our, I can open that up now. I will check with our IT staff and see. I know we're doing some updates, so I will see what has happened there. I can tell you in 2016, the 3 program sites that we funded were the University of Alabama. The second was the Youth Outreach Services in Chicago, and then Dallas County. And then in 2017, we made the 2 awards to Capacity Building Inc. Incorporated in New Mexico, and then the other 2 St. Francis Hospital and Medical Center in Greater Hartford, Connecticut. But thank you for calling that to our attention. I will see what is going on with that link. Can you clarify, is the expectation there is evidence of functional multidisciplinary teams, or that there is specific So the question is, can you clarify, is the expectation that there is evidence of a functional multidisciplinary team, or that there is a specific MDT addressing the population already in existence? Let me get to the specifics of that. So the requirements per the solicitation are that you have a in-place functioning multidisciplinary team that can support this approach. And again, there's a list of what that can include. Now again, the training and technical assistance provider will also provide support and guidance, but this team should serve as the case staff entity and be in place and be able to articulate who is already a part of that team. And we talked about the target population is 18 and under the age of 18. I'm going to read this one out loud, and I might need some clarifying on it. If a Category 1 project includes training that will be performed by the Category 2 awardee, do funds need to be included in Category 1 applicant's budget, or will these training cover? Okay, so this, I believe the question, and if I'm not capturing it, please write again. So project funds, the training, the grantees should budget for the training, the grantee meeting, within their budget to fund up to 3 representatives to attend an all grantee meeting every year of the award. So across the three years, funding for travel, lodging, meals and entertainment, or meals and MI&E, for 3 staff to travel for this training. That would not be covered by the Category 2 applicant. The Category 1 applicant should budget for that travel. Now, the training and technical assistance would be covered by the Category 2 applicant. So them coming to provide on-site training and technical assistance, monthly webinars, monthly meetings, those costs be covered by Category 2. I hope that answered that. Can the multidisciplinary team be newly convened? Yes. Is Category 1 intended to fund new services only, or existed unfunded services eligible for funding? Existing unfunded services are eligible for funding, yes. Does not have to be new services being provided.
Thanks, Cindy. We have about 26 minutes left, and then see some folks are indeed writing. So please remember, folks, to please continue to submit your questions in the chat box. And don't forget, you have the handouts located directly above there that you can access by clicking the file name and clicking the download button. So while we do that, we'll go ahead and address some more questions, Cindy, that are coming in.
Okay. Again, clarifying that the target population is under the age of 18. If you apply for Category 1, do you have to have a contract in place with a Category 2 applicant? No, it will not be contractual. The agreement will be with the U.S. Department of Justice, of our office, with funding to Category 2 through this application. There will not be a contractual agreement between you and Category 2. I'm waiting for a few more questions. Is there a minimum number of children to be served? No, there is not a minimum number of children to be served. Will priority consideration be given to applications that include opportunity zones but extend beyond the zone as well? The priority will be given to those that include, let's see, we'll find that again, opportunity zone. And certainly will include in the narrative programs and project goals that extend beyond the zone, but we are looking for those that are within the opportunity zones.
And again, I encourage folks.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, my bad, Cindy. Go ahead. My apologies. Sorry.
Just a question again about eligibility. Let's see. Yes, it's for successful applicants should have established multidisciplinary team, support comprehensive holistic approach to treating adolescents who commit sex crimes and youth with sexual behavior problems, and to provide support services to victims and family caregivers. So the eligibility requirements for both categories, I will find that again. Are limited to states. Let's see. Limited to states, including territories, units of local government, federally recognized Indian tribal governments, nonprofit organizations, and institutions of higher education. And we do welcome applications where 2 or more entities would carry out the federal award. However, only one entity may be the applicant. These are all great questions. I'm not ranking them. This one is an interesting one, though. Because there is no minimum number of children to be served, will cost per participant be a factor in reviewing? For example, if one proposal serves 50 youth with $100,000 is not scored as highly as a proposal to serve 75 youth for $100,000. No, we will not be doing a cost per participant review in the review process. And again, we do still have time, but as questions come up, the Response Center will be able to address the requirements of the solicitation, and grants.gov will be available to assist with any technical issues you may happen, that may occur.
And just a reminder to folks, if you have questions, please type them into the chat box. And again, as Cindy said, contact the Response Center here if you also have any questions after today's webinar. All right. Yeah, and thank you all for attending. Sorry, I'm verbally responding to some of you in the chat here. So, yes, thank you to you all as well.
All right, William, as we're winding down, I don't know if you want to take the next couple minutes to close us out.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. And no worries, we're ending about 20 minutes early, which is totally fine. We'll go ahead and just go and wrap up. And again, if you all do have questions that you couldn't think of today or totally forgot to answer, don't forget to contact the Response Center. That information is indeed in the handouts. pod where you can access the PowerPoint here that has that information. So before we wrap up, just a few last-minute items to remind folks about. Don't forget that you can contact NTTAC through the website displayed on this slide. And don't forget that you can stay up to date on the latest and greatest information by signing up for NTTAC's TTA listserv. And also don't forget to check us out on Facebook at OJJDP TTA. You can also contact OJJDP via the Help Desk by following the contact information in this slide. And do you have a training and technical assistance need? Well, if so, please submit a request via OJJDP's TTA 360 platform through the link displayed on this slide. As a reminder, the webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube channel, where you can also view past webinars. For the event transcript and supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk, and the information is displayed on this slide. And lastly, we would greatly appreciate it if you all could take about 5 minutes to complete a feedback evaluation. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.